now. It is 5:30. And we're gonna go ahead and do roll call. And so go ahead and just state whether you're here or not, because I can't see folks online. Marty Gator.
Yeah, I'm here.
Perfect. Marianne Nolte. Mike Eister.
Here.
Vidal Francis, and we're going to make sure we spell your name correctly on the agenda. Thank you for being here.
He's here.
Rihanna Hensley. Counselor Evans.
Here.
Philip Shimhu. Elaine Eller Moe. Claire Surratt is out today. Hoover Camblis. Kathy Duzing. Board Member Pete Knox.
Here.
And Gino Grimaldi. Who did I miss that's online? I can't see from here. Is everyone's here? Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. Do we have any audience participation today?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Rob Seiko.
Rob? I will go ahead and pass over to Allie for the time clock and let you go ahead and say when to start, Allie. I'm going to mute.
Is there a code to get online? Yeah.
Sorry, Allie might have that. The link to the Zoom.
Oh, yes.
I just need to get on the Wi-Fi.
Appreciate folks' patience as we, technology is our friend sometimes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rob.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
I can't see you and you can't see me. The technology is a little weird. I'm Rob Zako. Of course, I'm the Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. I will be tuning in this evening and very interested in the mobility management strategy draft for you to discuss. I and Beth see this as an important step towards what's being called LTD 2.0, LTD becoming more of a mobility management agency. I have a lot of things going on, and I could only briefly skim through the draft, and it looks like there's a lot of interesting material in there. But to be quite blunt, I'm not quite sure what it's telling us or you. There's a lot of details. I would like to hear an executive summary of just a minute or so of what is this saying about the future of LTD. And maybe that's something you will discuss this evening. But just to be clear, BEST supports LTD's move towards more mobility management. We're interested to see where this goes and interested to hear your discussion this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zako. Councilor Evans? Oh, do we have the Wi-Fi link available? Do we have anyone else for audience participation? Okay, thank you. Marianne is here. Thank you. Thanks for folks who are keeping an eye on that since I can't see from here. Appreciate that. All right. We're going to go ahead and move into having Andrew speak about our mobility management strategy. And thank you, Rob, for your testimony, or your feedback.
Great, thanks. So really excited to be here tonight. We've been talking about our mobility management strategy for a while now, and I want to start off just kind of talking about what mobility management is. If you go to the next slide. So I really like this definition, really talking about how mobility management is an approach to designing and delivering services that starts with the customer. And really it's a vision in which the transportation network, public transit, private operators, basically the whole system works together to deliver the transportation options that best meet our customers' needs, right? It's kind of taking our traditional approach of we put this out there and you take it if you want, and we say, how do we serve you? Right, and not just LTD, but how does LTD work with private sector partners? How does LTD work with other public agencies? How do we work with nonprofits to make sure that our community can get where they need to go? So the point of the mobility management strategy is really to help us determine what LTD's role can be in making our system of mobility in Lane County, in our district, more connected. With the outcome of that, right, our goal with this is not just mobility for mobility's sake, right? We're interested in how we can help our community get to places like grocery stores, visiting friends and family, right? Getting to work, getting to appointments. And so Jameson often asks staff the question, right, who does our community need us to be? And I think that mobility management is an important part of us taking a look at that, right? It's us saying, how do we engage with everything that's out there to make sure that we're doing what we can to connect our community. That's our mission here at LTD, connecting our community. And this is a big piece of how we can really think about how we're doing that. Next slide, please. So the process we used to arrive at this strategy, we began in 2021. We started by talking with 2 other transit agencies. We did some community outreach. Talking with our customers is always super important, talking with the community. We worked with other community stakeholders, people who deliver transportation services in our area. We talked with staff at LTD to figure out, kind of as we've done some of these things in the past, like, how does this impact our organization? What does our organization need to do to really take this on? With that, we developed case studies, we documented existing services, all the partnerships LT's already in. I think if you've seen our presentations before, right, we came up with a list of, I think, 12 or 13 different roles that LTE could play in delivering services in the region. We do all of them already, right? And so all of that, there's a lot of technical work that kind of goes with this, but we wanted to make a document that was, I think, usable by our board and the public, right? It's high level, it's a strategy, and we're happy to share all of that technical work that goes into it. We have needs analysis, right? We have our community outreach kind of summary that we'll be wrapping up. But really what we wanted to present on tonight is the strategy itself, which is kind of that high level, here's where we're going. Right? Because a lot of that technical stuff, it's pretty specific, and it's pretty specific to modes we know about today. Right? Part of the strategy is that we want to be adaptable in the future. And this is an approach. It's not about, what does LTD do about scooters? Scooters are a recent thing in our community. Who knows if they'll be here in the future? Who knows what comes after scooters, right? We want to be ready to engage with all of these things. So next slide, please. One thing I really want everyone to walk away from this meeting understanding is that LTD is already a mobility manager. This is, a lot of times in the conversations we have, we talk about new things, right? I just said scooters. We've been piloting mobility on demand. We've had 2 pilots with that now, right? These are fairly new things. But mobility management isn't new to LTD. We've been doing this through our RideSource call center, which has, I think, 18 or 19 different programs. John Allen would have to correct me on that. Right, it's one call to the customer. We were part of getting bike share in Eugene. We did the feasibility study here, and we've been a partner with them, making sure that bike share gets people to transit. We've been working with the city on that and the nonprofit that runs that, making sure that it's a good option for our transit riders, filling in that first mile, last mile gap. And then, as I mentioned, we've done pilots for other types of services that are, not traditional transit. They're flexible. They're not necessarily fixed route. Really trying to figure out how we can meet our community's needs. So we've been doing mobility management. The point of this strategy is to make sure that we're doing that deliberately so we can do it more efficiently we can kind of evolve more quickly and really take this on as an approach that's embedded in all of our work, not these kind of one-off pilots that we do from time to time. And so yeah, next slide, please. So getting into the strategy, want to talk about a couple of things. The key elements of it, right? Like really what we're saying is LTD should embed mobility management in all of our work, right? We had to do the study to really be able to definitively say, right, mobility management can fill gaps in our community, right? That's our approach to this. We can fill gaps in the community. We think about them in terms of spatial gaps, places that don't have service or don't have adequate service today. And we think about them in terms of specialized services gaps. So, right, like maybe you need a different kind of transportation. Our RideSource is a great example of that. I mentioned there are actually a lot of programs involved in our RideSource call center. So we're trying to meet a lot of different people's different needs, right? And you can have different needs based on different days of the week. So more options. And I think we also, when we talked with the public, we found that there's kind of an interest in this, right? Our public outreach wasn't like some market analysis survey. We were saying, you know, what exactly do you want LTD to do? We were trying to gauge public interest in, you know, are there gaps? Do you want to see more services in the region? Do you think LTD is a good fit for that? And what we heard, naturally, we hear lots of different people have different types of barriers and gaps that they face. They want different solutions to that, ranging from more fixed route bus service, which was one of the most common things we heard, to, you know, I need this really specific type of service that probably would only serve one person. And so we heard the range of that input, but we heard that people want better transportation, more connectivity in our area. And we also heard from people that they're comfortable with LTD playing that role. And we think through our other work, our technical work, that LTD really has an opportunity to be a more active player in trying to fill those gaps. Next slide, please. So one of the ways that we're approaching this, really thinking about how we can use all these different tools, how do we be strategic with it, is thinking about different types of opportunity areas. Geographically speaking, we think about transit opportunity areas, which are those that are less than a half mile from our existing services, not so much the rural services that come infrequently, right? But our core services that come, you know, pretty frequently most of the day. And for those people, you know, a lot of what we heard and a lot of what we can offer is, for most people, the best investment we can make is expanding frequency and span of service, right? More fixed route service is a really important part of doing mobility management. It's something we already do. Buses are really efficient at moving people, and it's always going to be a really key part of our service. But when we move to our next opportunity area, right, first and last mile opportunity areas, those are people that are pretty close to transit, but they're a little bit too far to walk. And so the question becomes, like, how do we connect them to transit? We think about a half mile to 3 miles. We're calling those first mile, last mile opportunity areas. And we really want to focus on how do we get those people to our existing services, right? Build our ridership, like leverage our existing investments in fixed route service and get those people where they want to go. Finally, we have supplemental service opportunity areas. Those are greater than 3 miles away from our kind of core service. Most of these are outside of the metro area, and a lot of them are in rural places, our smaller cities that we serve. There's actually quite a bit of variation when you're talking about those areas, right? Downtown Cottage Grove is very different than someone who lives maybe on Territorial Highway outside of Anita, right? They need different services. There are a lot of other kind of complicated things that go along with that, such as longer trip distance, right? Lower population densities, lower job densities. So the services that LTD can focus on there are quite different than things we might look at in the metro area, or maybe just different flavors of kind of services. So that's kind of how we're framing that. We also really want to point out that there are also specialized services gaps, right? I mentioned that different people have different needs, sometimes on different days. And so we want to make sure we're not just thinking geographically, but also about what our customers' needs are too. And so this type of when we do the analysis, right, we're also being very cognizant of the fact that we can fill these specialized services gaps too. Next slide, please. So keeping going through the strategy, right, another one of our big findings is, I mentioned this, but fixed route's the backbone of our system. A lot of other things that we can do they're not efficient in the way that fixed route is, and they're really great at meeting certain types of needs, but they don't meet all of our community's goals. And one really effective way that agencies are using these newer tools is, as I mentioned, to connect people to fixed route transit service. But that means that we need to have a really high quality, fixed route transit service that comes frequently and meets people's needs. That can carry people longer distances. Other services can connect them within their neighborhood and connect them to transit. But fixed route is really good at what it does. So we need to invest in that. It's the backbone of our system. I didn't want to list them out. We have lots of graphics. There's one on the screen right now looking at kind of what modes are appropriate for what types of trip distance, right? When we talk about mobility management, we need to be very clear about what the purpose of a new service is, right? What is the objective we're trying to meet here? And so we've done a lot of work looking at what options we have. It turns out LTD has a lot of options if we want to invest, right? There's maybe been in the last 5 or 10 years an explosion of options, really. There are almost too many options sometimes when we think about it, but we have good choices out there and we should be investing in those and investigating them. And finally, piloting projects is going to be really important for us to be successful. It's one way that we can get projects on the ground, figure out if they work without doing years-long planning studies, right? We can just try things. Sometimes we won't be successful. That's okay. We'll learn lessons, right? We have done 2 pilots for mobility on demand, the MGO service in downtown Eugene and the LTD connector. The LTD connector provides service within Cottage Grove, and it's really effective at doing that. We could probably have a whole meeting about how great that service is. MGO, I think, didn't do quite what we thought it would, if I'm just giving my analysis of it. But that doesn't mean we didn't learn lessons, right? We actually learned quite a bit from doing MGO. And so from a ridership perspective, it didn't get as much ridership as our service in Cottage Grove, but it did allow us to test different vehicle types, to test a service model within our metro area. And now we can take those lessons and apply them somewhere else. And maybe we'll have, a higher ridership or something that fills a gap that we want to keep around. Next slide, please. So basically our goal with this was to come to SPC, talk with you all, and we want to take this to the board, this high level strategy. I mentioned we have other kind of documents. I put the decision process document about how we're going to implement our decision-making framework that we developed in your packet. We'll have the pilot guide laid out by the time it goes to our board. That's kind of in process right now. So you'll see that. That's really based on best practices. And so we felt comfortable kind of not necessarily getting your feedback today because it's going to be iterative. What we think is the best practice today, we're going to continue to learn and evolve. But as we implement this, we're going to need to internalize that decision-making framework and kind of embed mobility management as our approach throughout the agency. And so that means we're going to be developing pilot projects, actively with public and private sector partners. We're going to need to engage with our local universities to conduct research both on our pilot projects and help us understand how we're impacting our community and kind of the ways that we're succeeding. But also to engage, with the bigger conversation that other agencies are grappling with. Our university partners have been really helpful in providing us with information and being open to working with us. And so we need to continue to develop those as well. We need to actively pursue funding for this stuff. We have a really good history of funding our fixed route service in Lane County. We're doing pretty well for other areas of our size. Obviously, we can always do better. But we need to actively identify grants and go after those and think about non-traditional grants. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, at the federal level for us to pursue grants that we've never pursued before to try and do this work. We're not the only ones interested, and so we should be pursuing that. Finally, you've heard Tom talk about this, and we had a public comment about it, right? But LTD is really thinking about the way that we serve our community, and Tom's been calling it LTD 2.0. I think we're maybe working on a better name for it, but really it's embedding this into all of our plans and policies, right? And so instead of a long-range transit plan that only talks about a frequent transit network, we want to have a long-range transit plan that talks about all of these other things, right? And provides policy guidance and support for these other more flexible and kind of non-traditional things for our transit agency to do. And so in the coming years, you'll see us embed this type of work in plans that are more specific. This is really high level, right? But that's what helps set us up to say, actually, your long-range transit plan, your strategic business plan, all of those things should have this at the forefront if this is what we're pursuing. So next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have some other products that we'll be using to help kind of do what I just said, right? Implement it. We have a decision-making framework that really is about helping staff have internal conversations. We want to adapt that so that we can have kind of conversations with you all. But really it's a way to have structured conversations, and we want to use that to start looking at how we evaluate these pilot projects and how we make those trade-offs when we're talking about where does the next dollar go, right? Does it go into fixed route or does it go into something else? How are we making a big difference in connecting our community? I mentioned we have the pilot guide that should be done very soon. It's getting laid out. Really, it's just synthesis of best practices. How should LTD be doing this? How do we structure pilots to be successful? What are other people doing to be innovative to make those happen more quickly? Government can move really slowly. A lot of our private sector partners want to move quickly. And so how do we be more responsive and innovative in the way that we do procurement and piloting? And finally, LTDs, we've got some cross-functional work groups we've started up, and one of those is a mobility management one. And so Jameson's asked us to get a small group of people together and figure out how we can actually start doing this tomorrow. We've got some pretty aggressive deadlines, and so I know we haven't adopted the strategy yet, but LTD understands that we need to be doing more to fill gaps in our community, that there are options for us to do that, and that this is a really great way for us to really connect our community, which is our mission. I think that was my last slide. Yes, it was. So with that, really happy to have some discussion or questions if you all want to do that. Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you, Andrew. I understand that this is an evolving process, but it's a little bit unclear to me whether that will, the fact that it's evolving will allow for there to actually be a mobility management plan document at some point.
So sorry if that was confusing. What I mentioned was being laid out. That's the pilot guide only. And so what we did was we kind of wanted these things to be independent, right? I would say it's almost like an appendix. And so what was included in your packet is a draft of the mobility management strategy. That's our strategy document that says, go do this. This is something that will let LTD really try to fill these gaps in a way that we haven't before. Here's how we can think about that and frame the topic. The pilot guide, kind of the decision-making framework, the needs analysis, those are all things that I think need to be iterative. We don't want to just make a document, say, this pilot guide was great. It was great in 2023. And then somebody figured out a way to do this stuff better, right? We want that to be, as I mentioned, we want to iterate, we want to learn, and we want to embed those things. So I don't think we want to adopt, a guide to running pilots as our, official, the only way to do that, right? If our board adopts a pilot guide, then we're stuck with that. And I think we want it to be based on best practices, but we want it to be able to evolve with us as an agency, really. But the strategy itself, right, that this is a useful tool, it's a useful way to think about how we're providing service and a useful approach to looking at new services. I think that is what we want our board to weigh in on and say, we see value in that. And you all as well, right? That's why we're here tonight. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
Councilor Evans?
Your mic's off, can't hear you.
That's better. Areas that are currently underserved, and what are the reasons why, for instance, my area in West Eugene, which is on the outer edges of the fixed route service. So the 41 comes out my way, but basically it truncates at North Terry and Barger. So the whole area west of North Terry and the area north of Barger, north and west of Barger, and some to the east of North Terry is significantly underserved. Now, I understand that the numbers are the numbers in terms of the ridership. And at one point, we were running service all the way down to Green Hill, but we were having, I think, one trip an hour or something of that nature. My interest has been in how we disaggregate that service in a way that we create the kind of consistency in terms of, connecting neighborhood circulators or some other kind of public-private partnership that flows into the main service, so that if you live out off of Barger and you're living west of Terry, that you don't have a major walk to come to Terry and get to the bus, and then you're on the bus for 45 minutes or whatever to get to downtown, and then another 30 minutes to get across town to where you need to go. So it's about shortening the time and the distance of trips and travel where people need to and want to go, whether that is for medical appointments, shopping, or whatever the case may be, and having the frequency and consistency so that ridership can access it. Because right now, my neighbors, my family don't have the kind of access that we need. I have people in my neighborhood who have mobility issues that need to have, ride source, or maybe don't quite need ride source, could use the fixed route system, but because the fixed route system isn't as accessible as it really needs to be, we are losing, I think, ridership, and we're not being able to manage mobility in a way that is going to be convenient and productive for the entire community. And I'd like to see if you can at least speak to part of that. That's kind of a long-winded question, but that's what I'm interested in the future, is being able to connect neighborhoods that are underserved by the current system and creating more capacity through a mobility management system that utilizes different modes, that flows into and is managed by LTD.
Yeah, so I mean, without looking at the numbers, right, let's talk broadly about what this strategy says about, I think, the issue you're talking about. And I would say that it sounds like you live in what we called a first mile, last mile opportunity area, right? You're just a little bit too far from transit today, and we don't serve you super well without a really long walk. And so I think, I don't want to say old LTD, because old LTD did care, right? But with the mobility management strategy, I think the old way of thinking was, well, if fixed route doesn't work, it sounds like there's not enough ridership, or there's not enough resources to justify coverage service, or whatever the reasoning was, right? That we said, well, if fixed route bus doesn't go there, there's not a whole lot we can do because we do fixed route buses. If we're a mobility manager, the question is, well, if a fixed route bus doesn't work, is there something that would work, right? Maybe it doesn't work for everybody, but is there something LTD can do? Does LTD need a partner, right? What are the conditions under which we could do that? It's not a yes or no, you get a fixed route or you don't. It's how can we play a role in facilitating mobility for people in that neighborhood? Maybe fixed route doesn't make sense. There are neighborhoods where fixed route buses can't run because the streets weren't built for it, right? We're never going to run fixed route service there. That doesn't mean we can't do something there. That doesn't mean we can't partner with other organizations, because we also know that we can't do it ourselves, right? People ask, why doesn't LTD do X, Y, and Z, right? And part of the answer is we can't. We may not be legally able to. Our organization isn't set up to run scooters, for instance. I'm not saying scooters would fix your neighborhood's problems. Maybe microtransit would, or maybe bike share would, or maybe a combination of things would. We have to look at that. And know the specific answer to your neighborhood, but I think the mobility management strategy is LTD saying it's not a fixed route bus or nothing, that we can and should have a role in providing mobility in areas like you're describing.
I understand that, but that's precisely my point. I have a brand new subdivision that's coming up, which is west of North Terry on Barger, that's on the south side of Barger. And there are going to be a number of homes that are going to be built in that area. In fact, there are a number of homes that have been built over the last 20 years in that area. And yet, and still, there's, you know, we have pulled service back because of ridership numbers and people not taking the bus. The big question is who are those private partners going to be? What is the vehicle that will be able, the LTD will be able to connect with, say, a private provider, whether that's Uber, Lyft, or another provider that will provide some kind of micro transit service that connects into the broader service profile for LTD and makes it easier for people to travel to their destinations instead of having to deal with the hub and spoke system that we currently have, which I think has been outdated for years.
Yeah, so I don't have a direct answer to your question because I think we're at step one. Step one is LTD saying we should have a role in that, right? I don't think we used to do that. So step one is where we're at and we're saying we should have a role. Exactly what could meet that need, right? And how do we put that into, you know, the list? Because if I go to other neighborhoods, I hear people have needs all the time. We know that LTD is not the only one, right? But our community has a lot of needs. LTD meets a lot of them, not all of them. Other providers meet some of them, not all of them. And so I think the answer is how do we get that into our plans and policies? And the answer is this is step one. We're going to be hopefully using this approach if our board adopts it as a strategy to get this into our comprehensive operations analysis. And so when we look at our fixed route services, how they're performing, right, we can look at your neighborhood and say, well, here's how fixed route's performing. Here's how something else could work with that. It goes into the strategic business plan. It's going to go into our, you know, funding, our budget, our capital improvements plans, and it has to make its way through there so that we can, I think, figure out what the answer for your neighborhood is. I don't have an answer for you today, but if we get it in those processes where we're looking at the whole community and saying, there's a clear need there, let's figure out how to fix that need. Here's how we can do that with maybe something that's not a fixed route bus, or maybe actually it is a fixed route bus, right? Maybe there are enough homes there now. Maybe LTD needs to run the fixed route bus over there. I don't know the answer to the question today, but this is step one in figuring that out.
I see Marty has his hand up.
Hello. Yes, actually, I just wanted to throw a quick suggestion. I don't know if anybody's had a conversation with Archimoto and where their status is. I know they've been kind of up and down as far as what they're doing in a business model, but as far as some of those micro routes and trying to augment, that could be a conversation as well. I don't know if that's a possibility, but I said I would just throw that in as a potential partner.
We're open to working with anyone.
Okay. I just thought I would throw it in as a suggestion. I don't know what their plans are, where they are as far as business growth. I know they've been through a lot of flux, but I know they've got a local product. I think that would be kind of obviously probably a summertime thing, probably not during the winter, but that could be something that's possible. That's a suggestion. That's all.
Thanks, Marty. Vidal?
All right, thank you. Andrew, thank you for coming here, giving the presentation, because the truth is change is always difficult. And I applaud LTD for trying to make that change to improve themselves, improve also the services that we do have in the community. The question I have is, with this new approach, in terms of looking at your progress, how are you going to be able to monitor your improvement, if I can say this right, over time with this new approach?
I think that's a great question. And I think Project by project, I can answer really easily, right? Like when we start a service, let's just say, like when we do the pilots, right? One of our best practices is you need to set up hypothesis and metrics at the beginning, right? We shouldn't run pilots and just see how they go, right? We should have an idea in mind. We want to better connect school kids to, I don't know, playgrounds, right? That's our goal with a project. And so we'll measure that specifically. How do we do that big picture with the broader community? I think that's a conversation with our community. And I think that's part of the conversation we're having in our community outreach and communications assessment we're working on, right? I don't think I should sit here and tell us how to measure how well we're doing. I think our community should tell us how well we're doing. And if we are successful with mobility management, we'll be helping people get where they want to go. We'll be making more connections. And I have to imagine they'll tell us we're doing a better job. On a project by project basis, though, I think we can easily measure that because we'll set up very specific goals about what we want to see. And some of those things won't be ridership, right? To be clear, like sometimes ridership isn't the goal. Sometimes other things are way more important than how many people rode a service. And so we just need to be very upfront about that. And then we'll measure those.
Tom, you had a response to that?
Got to try. First of all, good question. Just to build on what Andrew was saying, I think part of how we're seeing this is this is a step in I'll say a network of planning efforts that we're going through. You may be familiar with the fact that the comprehensive operations analysis is a cyclical every 3 years. We're looking at that. What Andrew went through today is talking about how we're expanding our view about how we can provide access and accessibility to people that right now don't have good access, I'll say, to public transit. And so, some of the measurement is going to be not just, are we feeding people to our buses, our ridership going up as a result? Some of that's going to happen. I think some of it too is this kind of transportation, this range of transportation options is going to be able to provide accessibility directly to people. So you'll see, so we'll measure, the pilots, how successful are the pilots in these things. Again, we didn't go into a lot of detail, but the connector down in Cottage Grove, by all measures, and when you look and compare to others for that kind of service, people are gaining a lot of accessibility just with that kind of service. So we know we're learning what works. We're putting, this plan and strategy together to help us explore further and develop. Again, I think for me, one of the most telling pieces of analysis that came out of this was that, there's roughly speaking, 60% of the population in the district is more than a half an hour or more than 3 miles, half mile away from 30-minute service or better. So that to me, that's a baseline that we're going to look at as we go through these other efforts to try and see how we can improve that. And I think what Greg just described is a great example of how we can focus on that.
One other comment, and you can respond to this if you want, but also with this new approach here, have we thought about presenting LTD as an alternative mode, or let's say an alternative choice of travel or mode to travel for the various populations? It doesn't matter where you're at throughout Lane County, but are we presenting this as an alternative for folks to ride?
So let me see if I understand your question, because how I want to answer. I'll tell you how I want to answer it and see if it answers what you're asking.
Gotcha.
So to me, the mobility management strategy is an extension beyond what we have traditionally operated as fixed route transit.
Right.
And it's intended in a broad sense to broaden the accessibility and mobility of the population within our district. And that's how I'd answer your question. I mean, the fixed route, as Andrew has said, is a core part of our mobility offerings. But these other things start to really create some valuable accessibility for people that, again, might be too far away from the.
Right.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, what I was thinking about was there are some folks out there who they actually would have rode the bus, but they lean more or opt to just ride their vehicle or even ride the car, whatever. But in this new way of thinking or this new approach, are we trying to also reach out to those folks who within themselves, you know what, if I had the opportunity, I would go ahead and ride the bus. And that's what I mean, having LTD being that rider or that mode of choice. Is that part of this overall approach to as well? That's kind of where I was leaning towards.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think the way I would answer that is, right, like if somebody wants to drive their car, they're going to do that. That's great. We're not trying to stop you from driving your car, but we are trying to make a transportation system that doesn't ever make someone drive a car, right? That if you want another option, we're not there today, but if you want another option, if you don't want to drive your own car, we really want an option to be there for you. We want it to be an option that actually works for your trip. We know sometimes we have options, but they don't work for people, right? Like sometimes they work on Monday, but not on Tuesday. People's lives are hectic and busy. And so we're trying to figure out how we get that mix of choices, right? It's not a fixed route bus or nothing, right? LTD has a role in providing a whole range of things. And we do want to be seen as that option. We want to be seen as the people who really make the connective tissue work.
Great. Yeah, that's the question I was asking. Thank you. Thank you both.
Marianne.
Thanks. And thanks, Andrew, for the explanation. This has been really helpful. I have a question about using the strategy. So I'm looking at the part of the packet that says how to use this document. And it outlines the purpose of the strategy. And I think all of those things are really great, like analyzing the needs, understanding the best role for LTD to play, identifying the key actions. What I'm curious about is how does that get implemented? Like, under what conditions will you roll out the strategy? How will you know when it's time to take a look at these things and define LTD's role in any given situation? Does that make any sense?
I think it does. You're asking why isn't there a list of projects, right? What is going to be on the street next week? How does the rubber meet the road? And I think the answer is, it's kind of hard to answer that question, right? This is an approach. We wanted this to be a high level strategy because we want it to work for us for a long time, right? We're basically saying we want to assume more responsibility for mobility in this region and taking an active role in that. How a project gets put together really depends on, we need to be opportunistic, right? And so part of this is acknowledging that we should be actively seeking out partnerships with public and private operators. Sometimes LTD might want to fill a gap, but not really have any good options for that, right? Maybe we don't have funding in 1 year. Maybe we aren't good at doing something like bike share, for instance. Like maybe bike share is the answer to someone's transportation problem out there. And if LTD can help fund that, or if LTD can help, provide space for our partners to place a bike share station, right? That's LTD's role in that. And we need to look at those opportunities very individually. I think that's where the decision-making framework we've referenced comes in. Right? It's a way for LTD to have a structured conversation about the best way to do that. If bike share is going to solve someone's problem, it doesn't make sense for LTD to go out and buy a bunch of bikes and hire bike mechanics, right? We have someone else in town who does that. We need to find a way to get bike share to them. And what is LTD's role? Well, it really depends, right? Does LTD have money that we can fund them with? And so that's why I say it really depends. And this strategy is not intended necessarily to say, yes, this, no, that, here's a list of projects, here's what's going to happen in 2023, 2024, and beyond. Because we wanted this to set the stage for us to address those issues as they come up. And as I mentioned, to get this kind of thinking about how we deliver service into our longer range plans and policies. And so this will show up in our long-range transit plan, in our capital improvements plan, in our strategic business plan, and what else am I missing? Comprehensive operations analysis, all these things that are coming up that we need to refresh. Mobility management strategy is going to be kind of like the key framing of how those are executed. And so through those, you will start to see that come up. But like individual projects could come up. We have funding identified for a pilot project in 2025. And so we're going to be actively part of our mobility management work group that we have at LTD. One of our first things is like, well, what's the best way to spend that money, right? What's a pilot project that's going to meet someone's needs that can be achieved for the budget that we have based on, you know, needs that we see in the community, and how do we learn from that? How do we make it a model that we can replicate somewhere else if it's successful? I don't know if that fully answers your question, Marianne.
Yeah, I think it does. I think more what I'm curious about is just how, trying to figure out how to phrase this so it makes any sense. I guess, will LTD be reacting to things that are going on in the community, like bike share, or will LTD be sort of driving the conversation to try and figure out, well, where are the gaps? Or will it be more reactive of like, somebody has said there's a gap, we weren't aware of it beforehand? I guess I'm just trying to figure out kind of
I think it's both.
Pardon the pun, but who's driving that?
Yeah, I think it's both, right? Like I mentioned, we're going to get this into our other plans and policies. And so when we do our comprehensive operations analysis, I don't think the question is fixed route or not, right? The question is, how do we allocate service across our region in a way that builds a system? And so LTD will be driving in that case. We have partners in the community today. And so South Lane Wheels in Cottage Grove, Peace Health Rides in Eugene, right? We have existing partnerships, and sometimes they come to us with an idea, and we're open to that too. So if somebody wants to approach LTD, right? We've even been looking at other agencies having like innovative procurement where people can basically pitch things to them. We don't have that, right? We have to make sure that we're complying with all the laws and doing this stuff right. But part of this is being innovative. And so it's both, Marianne. We want to drive when it's appropriate for us to drive. But if somebody has a great idea, we also want to be super open to being able to help them execute that idea and playing the best role that LTD can, which isn't always driving, right? Sometimes the best role we can play is actually just supporting.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Marty, do you have another question, or is your hand still up from the earlier question?
Nope, that's a legacy hand, my bad.
I like that term, legacy hand. Any other questions from folks, or Mike, go ahead.
This is kind of an observation. It seems to me that our questions are indicative of where LTD has been, where our boards and committees are responding to a specific proposal from the staff, which is asking us to critique that proposal. And I think it was the last meeting where I said something along the lines of my prior longtime experience with LTD has been focused on where's our next MX route going to go? And this is 2.0. That isn't the question. The question is the question that Jameson asked. What does our community need from us? And it's a whole new way of thinking. And so I'm starting to get my head wrapped around it, but I'm still pulled to ask, where's the substance? What specific substance am I being asked to address? And at the time, I'm willing to put that on hold, because what you're trying to help us understand is that this is a new approach, and that approach, your goal is to interweave that approach into the way LTD thinks and operates. At some point, I'm going to want to know where the substance is. So that's my comment and observation.
Yeah, and we're, like I said, we're actively working on that. This is going to show up in our plans and policies. Tom also has some ideas partnering with academic institutions, right? We're actively trying to push this stuff forward. And that's, I think, where more of the question of, well, how is this going to change my service? Right now, adopting the mobility management strategy won't change your service. right? But as we do our other plans and policies, as we engage in that research with kind of our partners at universities and with private sector entities and with other public sector agencies to roll this stuff out, you will see changes in your service. And we're hoping that they're good. And as I mentioned, if they're not, most of them will probably be a pilot project. We'll try something else, right? We want to meet people's needs. And so we're going to be iterating and trying things. And we'll have, I think, a lot of good conversations about very specific proposals in the future, Mike. But the first step, as I mentioned, is for us to kind of lay this foundation and then embed it in the rest of our work. So it's not just one pilot, right? As I mentioned, we don't have to adopt a mobility management strategy. We could, kind of continue to be the way LTD has been. We actually have funding for a pilot project. That could be a one-off pilot project. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, right? But we're not doing things as an agency to actively embed this as a way we do our business. And so you'll continue to see one-off pilots and things that work sometimes. But we're really trying to transform our approach to delivering service to the community.
Mike, go ahead.
One more little follow-up is that it occurs to me it would be easy to respond to the loudest voice when we have this very open-ended. And I hope that in this annex of these various elements of the mobility management plan or strategy, that there will be some kind of guard in there to make sure that we're not just responding to the loudest voice. I recently had to park my car at the long-term parking at the Eugene Airport because I left at dark 30 and I didn't have another way to get there. So my car was parked there for 10 days, $160. I had no idea it was going to cost that much. And I might've been more creative. So I could be pounding my fist on the table and saying, LTD needs to get me from my house in Springfield to the airport at, 5 o'clock in the morning. But obviously you can't make public policy based on the loudest voice. Somehow you have to be able to figure out where the greatest need is. And so I hope that there's a method built into the process to try to weigh the greatest need.
I'm going to let Tom go, but I do want to echo what Mike is saying. I think that was one of the, looking at the analysis of mobility needs and gaps. So I appreciate this is sort of like our like a decision-making lens and all the other parts and all the other aspects. We're building this into the foundation of LTD. So again, is what I'm hearing. And what I'm hoping to kind of Mike's point, thinking about the loudest voice in the room, which is often folks that hold the most power in a space, right? That they're the ones that are able to influence and push the scales. What I appreciate seeing here is looking at, we talk about increasing access for traditionally underserved populations and folks. And again, very similar to what Councillor Evans was sharing, thinking about the weight of those voices at the table, talking about access, because all the folks listed on this, all the folks listed here, college students, shift workers, rural residents, households without vehicles, they share one thing in common is access to power and access to resources. So I appreciate that if that's really what we're going to be looking at, this tool is going to help us think about the folks most furthest from opportunity, most furthest from access. That's going to, like, the rising tide lifts all ships, right? So that's going to help. So I'm just hoping to Mike's point, and again, Councillor Evans, thinking about those folks that are in those areas farthest away. It's not necessarily, you don't live far, oftentimes if you're working here in town, you don't live far away because you might have a farm in like the country, but it's because it's cheaper out there. It's more affordable, cheaper. It's more affordable. And so anyway, I just want to say and share that thinking about century, and I'm hoping that's kind of what it seems like that's what this is. And I just want to make that voice that if we are looking at this lens of this decision-making tool, centering the voices of folks furthest from opportunity or have been historically marginalized from opportunity and access to resources, that feels good to me. And if we're using that to like think about all the decisions LTD is making, that's important. And also for me, thinking about framing this conversation, this space, who's not at this table right now that can represent those communities and those voices. So I just, as we think going forward for next SPC opportunities to have discussions, thinking about, as we're looking at this tool, how can this committee help LTD with those, be that voice in this space and represent some of these communities so that we can bring that to the table and give that feedback. So just I really appreciate that's kind of what my observation is that I'm hearing. And if that's what this tool is intended for, that makes me very excited, which I feel like it is. And I also feel like we're thinking in a space of abundance, not scarcity. How might we do things if we had this magic wand, which we don't have, but if we can think as our North Star, that magic wand abundance direction, how are we lifting everyone else up along with everyone? So I will hand it over to Tom now.
I'm not sure how much I can add after that, I have to say. That was very well put. But just to kind of wrap that up a little bit, what we're compelled to ask is, what does our community need us to be? And part of the answer is more than a fixed route transit system that's resource constrained and, for a lot of reasons, not able to serve, a big part of our population. So in that context, we're excited to move forward with the ability to look at these broader options to connect those people as part of our mission to connect the community. So I hope that, and again, Alma, how you put it was exactly, was resonating with me as you were talking. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you. And to me, it's aspirational. So how do we do that? So I think that's the thing, right? It is this tool. And to me, it's like, there are I know we have some folks online and we have folks on our little agenda here, but how do we make sure we bring those voices to this table so they can have more direct input and give more feedback? And so I look forward to these opportunities to talk to the community more and meet folks where they're at, because maybe we need to have one of these meetings out in the community where folks are. So, just thinking about, again, I'm excited about what I'm hearing is thinking a little bit differently, not to quote Apple, but thinking differently about how we approach things, looking at LTD 2.0. To me, it's like, how are we if we're going to talk about learning what the community needs us to be, let's make sure we're making those accessible opportunities to hear from the community. So that's my aspirational hope for what I'm hearing from everyone, that's the intention of this tool. So I'm excited for us to have this committee help support that work.
By the way, if I can, I'll add, Steve Jobs actually said, think different. And I mean, different, but different is how we want to think. We want to think different. Yeah. And so that's where we're headed. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Evans.
Yeah, I want to go back to something that Fazelle said. I think that our ridership falls into two buckets. It's either people who are transit-dependent or choice ridership. And for those who are transit-dependent, I grew up as a transit-dependent kid in the Midwest. I could look out of my front window and see the bus coming down the street. So I could time it when I would walk around the corner to get to the stop so I could get to the bus and all of that. When I look at people that live in my ward in Northwest Eugene, I'm looking at people who live next to my ward in Northwest Eugene and the next ward over in Ward 7. In Train Song, for example, Train Song is an isolated community. It is an extremely underserved community and highly underrepresented in a variety of these venues across Eugene. So because you have the combination of disenfranchisement, poverty, lack of access to certain, transportation modes and other things, I've got people who call cabs or call Ubers to go to Winco. Winco is not that far technically from that neighborhood to go up onto Barger and Echo Hollow. However, a cab ride or an Uber ride is almost cost prohibitive, but those people have to build that cost into the cost of their groceries and everything else. And so what we have to do and what we should be doing and what we've been trying to do for years, because, like Mike, we served on the board together. I worked for LTD 30 some odd years ago when I came to Eugene, is trying to figure out how we can provide the most cost-efficient service to the people who have the highest amount of need in terms of transportation to get to basic services like food and medicine, et cetera. And so that to me makes mobility management an exciting prospect. But at the same time, I want us to remember that as we are looking out and talking about adding choice ridership or trying to service more people who normally don't access our fixed route system, don't forget about the people who depend on our fixed route system and who also don't have the ability to access our fixed route system because of the geography of where they live. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. And it's one of the reasons we want to be mobility managers is to fix that problem. It's not just about choice riders. It's about people who wish they could ride. It's about people who ride today having a better experience.
All right, folks, any other feedback or responses? So I think it sounds like right now, part of what we need to do is to be able to agree that we're going to be making a recommendation for this to the board. Is that correct for our next steps?
So our goal with this would be at the June board meeting to give them a presentation similar to what you received today, and then ask them to adopt the mobility management strategy. Obviously, we would like to hear from you all whether you think that that is a recommendation that you make, right? Adopting the strategy, I think, means LTD taking ownership and saying, this is our approach. We're going to embed this in all of our work. And this is how we want to start thinking about delivering service to our community. And so if you all agree with that, then yes, we would like you to make a recommendation to the board that's something you feel that LTD should be doing.
Will we make a recommendation?
I think I'm going to check in and see if this, I think Mike and Tom had their hand raised really quick. So I want to check and see if there's any other responses to Andrew. Okay, so. All right. Okay. Thank you for that, Tom. Mike, go ahead.
Well, I think this is the second or third meeting where we've talked about mobility management. And I'm hoping that a head nod from the board would be sufficient to pass along, or from this committee would be sufficient to pass along to the board. And I feel very comfortable in supporting this as an approach, with the caveat that at some point I'm going to want to see what the substance is.
Totally. And to be clear, you know, we're hoping the board will adopt the document that was in your packet, the mobility management strategy, as LTD strategy, right? And that sets the approach. And so we're happy to kind of relay a head nod if I'm getting the signal we don't have the quorum tonight. We'll relay that. If you have any other concerns, I mean, we also want to address those. There's still an opportunity. So if you see something that's glaringly missing, right, we'll give any feedback that you have to the board. So.
Thank you, Andrew. Anyone online? I see Marianne's hand is raised. Go ahead. Oh, you are muted.
Fail. I guess the only caveat that I would want to add is it would be nice to, I think Rob Zako mentioned this earlier, but just maybe to have an executive summary about what the strategy is and what the purpose is. And then I would also like to see more clarity around how we're gathering feedback from the public with, as Mike said, or maybe it was Alma's, you know, hearing from the loudest voices. I would really like to know how this gets rolled out to gather public feedback so that we're really hearing from the people we need to hear. So if that can be made an addition, not this minute probably, but in future concepts, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you for that, Marianne. I think, yes, I think kind of capturing the feedback that we've had here, that's really helpful, just to, again, just remind folks of the intention of this. So any other questions or feedback? All right, folks, so we have our non-quorum head nod for being able to, and I'm excited for this direction. I do think, and also just for that executive summary, I feel like if thinking about folks that want to access and understand this without having to go through the whole packet, getting them excited too, our community excited, our users and our future users and folks who hope to use our system and everything as well. So thank you, Andrew.
Thank you all.
Okay, next up, we have our strategic business plan reporting. Amy, thank you.
Is that okay with you? I just say next. Okay. All right. Good evening, committee members. It's good to be here in front of this group again. There's some new faces and some familiar faces. My name's Amy Reichert. I'm a project manager here at LTD. The last time I was with this committee, it was last fall. And in terms of our strategic progress, LTD was actually coming off some really great progress around things like customer satisfaction. We had increased our customer net promoter score at that time from a -1 in 2021 to a 21 in 2022, which is good. It's a good thing. We also had reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 77% from our 2018 baseline. So lots of good things are happening back in November. And I'm happy to say we've continued to do a lot of great things. There's definitely some areas that we're watching. I think that's an important part of any good strategy is that we're making sure we're following the metrics and listening to them and asking of our work critically, is this going to help move the needle in the right direction? So that's what this is all about tonight. You can go ahead to the next slide. It's really, how are we doing? How are we doing on our strategic progress? And before I dive into any of those results, this slide, mission, vision, and values, it appears in all of our presentations at LTD. And it's really, it's foundational. And I'm going to emphasize it a lot tonight because it's the strategic business plan foundation. So let me just share, what I'm going to do is share a personal example of some things I work on day to day here and how this plays into what I do. So one of the tactics that I'm assigned on is focused on workforce diversity initiatives. So in partnership with the LTD Diversity Council, I've been analyzing our workforce metrics through a DEI lens, diversity, equity, inclusion, in order to establish some real and meaningful benchmarks against which we can improve. And as you can imagine, there's some hard questions that we have to ask of our organization, our policy, our procedures, all of this. So, you know, I've felt very empowered in this work in partnership with the Diversity Council to ground in our mission. We're connecting the community. We're using our values to really help guide the analysis and make a critical assessment of the findings and really empowering the team to work collaboratively, apply integrity and calling out our gaps and defining our next steps. So I share that because I think it's a really good example of how mission, vision, and values is really core in all of the work that we're doing. It sets a foundation and it's allowing us to really critically evaluate all of the work we do through a shared lens. You know, all of us are asking of our work, how does this align with our mission, vision, and values? So stay tuned for that DEI report. If that's something you wanna tune in, we'll be reporting that out in August of this year. Go to the next slide. So tonight, what I'm going to talk about, again, the strategic plan, I'm going to give a quick overview for people that may be tuning in for the first time. We'll go through our scorecard results for Q3 of fiscal year 23, and we'll look at some tactical work highlights. So as an overview, for people that are new or maybe just tuning in for the first time, we adopted our current strategic plan in September of 2021. After that, preceded a year-long effort, the first of its kind for LTD, to develop a robust plan with our foundational mission, vision, and values, down to tactical work plans and metrics to measure our progress. So you can see the little star here, that's where we're at. We're over halfway through now. Each year we've refreshed the work. So we're trying to make sure that we keep the work aligned with the right people at the right time to get the right results. And our current plan will, this current plan cycle is on a 3-year timeline. And so we'll be, not only we're currently looking at refreshing this year's work, we're going to start looking at the next strategic business plan cycle over the next year. Next slide. And so the goal with the plan is to have, it's meant to be dynamic. So we do have these foundational mission, vision, values. Those are core to the plan. And we're committed to working across high level across 5 strategic focus areas: customer satisfaction, employee engagement, community value, financial health, and sustainability. Within each of these 5 areas, we're measuring key performance indicators to help us determine if we're meeting our targets. And then we have tactical work outlined, which is meant to drive us towards those targets. And that's really the most dynamic part. We refresh that work annually. Again, as I said, we want to do the right work at the right time with the right people. And those are factors that are changing. They're very dynamic, especially in our current workforce. Okay, next slide. So that's kind of the overview of the plan, how we got to this moment right here. And let's look at our results. So one thing that we're going to be introducing this quarter is our performance dashboard, which you can view. It's live now on the ltd.org website. This is an active link. We're not going to go there tonight, but I want to encourage you all to dig in. That is where we're publishing our results. And there are actually some national benchmarks there as well. It's in partnership with Transpro and TransDash, and it's a good tool. It's in development still, but we're happy to say that it's out there for people to look at and evaluate our performance quarter over quarter. And let's go ahead and look at the results. So one thing to take into consideration with our key performance indicators, we have a mix of measures from everything that we are measuring daily to things that we only measure biannually. And then we report those out to the board quarterly. So what we're going to look at tonight are only the metrics that have changed quarter over quarter. But those do give us a pretty good snapshot of how we're doing in some of the areas. You can go to the next slide. So customer satisfaction, overall customer satisfaction indicators suggest that we've got good improvement and progress. We have an emphasis on safety and responsiveness to our customers. Our current work is focused on customer satisfaction indexing. So we're surveying our customers right now, as well as leadership service sampling. I know this is something that Jameson has spoken about. Our executive team is out there riding. That's really important. And, it's correlational, but we are noticing that, over quarter, we saw a significant decrease in our overall bus operator complaints. We're also trending in the right direction in accidents. We continue to have good on-time performance. And, we believe as a team that there is a good correlation between service sampling and improving in this customer satisfaction. And that's something we're going to continue to emphasize. Next slide. Okay, financial health, we've got some watch going on here. That's what the yellow means. LTD's financial health key performance indicators are off target for Q3. The good news is this is not unexpected. So one thing to make note of for Q3, our VEBA contributions get factored in January, which is Q3. And that always drives up operating costs. So we always expect to have higher operating costs in Q3. In addition, this last year, we had to include our union wage adjustments. So we knew operating costs were going to go up. As a countermeasure to this, our finance director has already defined new tactical work for fiscal year 24, and this will get adopted in the refresh. That's focused on reassessing our long-term financial assumptions. A lot of stuff changed in the last year that we're going to have to take into consideration when we're looking at operating costs. Next slide. In terms of sustainability, LTD is performing if you go to our dashboard, we're green. If you go back to slide, let's see, can you go back a couple slides? So this right here represents an aggregate of our scores under each area. There's multiple key performance indicators in each area. So at a glance, it looks like we're doing pretty good in sustainability. If we go back down to the sustainability slide, there we go, thank you. You can see that we actually have some watch going on there too. So here's the reason for this. We really hit it out of the park on our greenhouse gas emissions goal. We set a pretty ambitious goal to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 70% from our 2018 baseline by the end of this current strategic business plan cycle, which is next year. On our last measurement, which I think was 2022 or 2021, we had exceeded that. So we reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 77%. Exceeding our goal by 7%. So that's why we're green there. But we also know that, let me also highlight quarter over quarter in our ridership. We set a very ambitious ridership target. At the time that we were making this plan, we had just come out of the pandemic. We were trying to anticipate what would ridership look like 3-4 years from now. And we set a pre-pandemic goal along with a lot of other transit agencies across the country. And that was ambitious. I am excited to report that our ridership has continually increased quarter over quarter since the inception of this plan. It has never not gone up. So that's good. But it's certainly not where it was pre-pandemic levels. And so what does that mean? The work ahead for LTD is focused on innovation. I think that's what we've been hearing here tonight from Andrew. We're starting to think about things in a different way. And the mobility management strategy, the mobility management task force that Andrew was talking about is really here to continue to assess the role of transit, not only centering equity and access to transit, but also what is the imperative that we play in this role of sustainability. So that is a question that we'll be asking of ourselves strategically as we go forward. In general, we continue to really prioritize renewable fuel consumption, which is what helps keep our greenhouse gas emissions low. And then we know we need to also continue to think innovatively to really remain committed to this area. Okay, next slide. All right, so some tactical work highlights, notably absent from our quarterly metric updates. So I just shared 3 slides of updates. There was customer satisfaction and financial health and sustainability. So what about employee engagement and community value? Currently, our key performance indicators, when we first made this plan in 2021, we had some really great measures in employee engagement and community value, but they're all survey-based. So we measure them annually, and we're going to have those results. They're due next quarter. But what does that mean quarter over quarter? How are we measuring ourselves? So that's something that we'll be looking at in this next refresh. We're going to add KPIs that help us know how are we doing incrementally. And in the meantime, we also are really focusing in on this tactical work. So just to highlight a few things from this Q3 fiscal year 23 results, and in the employee engagement realm, we had our instructor training week was completed, which was very successful. Our operations command center, which is a huge capital project that's underway. The design process was very robust during Q3, engaged a lot of people, a lot of conversation, a lot of input to get to a place where we have really foundational guiding principles in this project with a commitment to keeping the staff engaged and really hoping that this lends itself to employee engagement in the long term. We also have a performance management reboot happening through our HR team. We're really centering staff understanding of how they're doing closer to real time, so we're getting feedback regularly to know how we're doing in the workplace. And then in terms of community value, we have, I mentioned leadership service sampling. We also have our Eugene Station modernization project, which is a huge community facing project where we'll be giving our downtown station an upgrade. Next slide. So what's next in our strategic plan journey? We have our 2023 employee engagement survey, which just kicked off, and we'll expect to report out those results next quarter. Our comprehensive operations analysis is kicking off, as Andrew mentioned. And as I've said a couple times, we'll have our fiscal year 24 strategic plan refresh. It's happening now. People are working on their tactics, and we'll be reporting out the changes in the work plans the next time I'm here with you. You'll be hearing about that. So a lot of stuff in progress, and the main thing is we continue to come back to this question of, how does this center on the foundation of our mission, vision, and values? And a new thing, I'm not going to say new, but something that we're really prioritizing as we continue to go forward and embrace the strategic planning mindset is how are we going to measure our progress? So when I hear people asking about what is this really going to look like and how are you going to know if you succeeded? Those are the questions we're going to be asking of every body of work that we define. How are we going to know we've been successful? Then we're going to measure it. And we actually have one of our tactics that we know for sure we're going to be doing in fiscal year 24 will be a business intelligence task force. So really try to start bringing some of the decisions together in a meaningful way. So that, I believe, is it. I will open the floor to questions. And I guess there's two things we can question about the results I've just presented, but also thinking ahead. We have a refresh coming up. I welcome input, comments, questions on that. And also the next step beyond that is a whole new strategic planning cycle. And maybe what have we learned from this process? And what does this group committee envision in our strategic planning process going forward?
Thanks, Amy. Mike.
This may be sort of an off-target question, but I saw the Operations Command Center design, and it made me wonder, are we building is it a new facility or is it a remodel of an existing facility? I was just sort of curious about it.
Yeah, it's actually this facility over this kind of part of the building. It's our actual current Operations Command Center. We'll be getting a complete upgrade, and then there'll be a little bit of footprint expansion, and yeah.
Thanks.
Any other reflections or responses or questions for Amy, folks? Looks like we just had that for Andrew, and so we appreciate you being here, Amy. All right, thank you, Amy. Really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to having the committee also look at, I would like to ask of our committee to be taking a look at the strategic business plan now and thinking on what Amy had requested. Is there feedback? Are there lessons learned or items that we want to share to be able to help inform that process as they're developing that plan as well? Okay. Anything else from the team or for the good of the order? Mike.
Well, it seemed like there was a definite effort to create metrics that will let us know how we're doing. How are we going to know if we did what we were trying to do? And that just feels like a really good direction. So kudos.
Just one question. This may be more so for clarification. When I looked at your slide that showed the 5 different measuring gauges, if you will, there was one in the middle that was a community value. Could you just explain to me what does LTD mean by community value in this? What are you measuring, or what are you looking at in that?
Sure. Yeah, we can actually look at the metrics. That might be the easiest way to do it. So would you mind navigating to the link that's in the slide deck there?
Thank you, by the way, too.
Yeah, and I went over there because I thought I was done answering questions, but I'm happy to answer questions. So
thank you.
Yeah, that's the link. Is it not working?
No, it is. It just
so. Oh, you have to.
Sorry. So
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you where to go, but this is what the dashboard looks like right now. And again, I said it's a new product, and so it's going to change over time. Iterative maybe is the word of the night. Things will iterate at LTD for sure. But this is a start, and if you go click on the community value there. And this kind of describes the intent of community value, but it's really about our partner, the community partners' perception of LTD. So different than maybe a customer, although a person can probably be a customer and a community partner, but this is really thinking about the greater fabric of the community and how we enhance that. And then the specific metrics that we're looking at, if you click on strategic areas up there, and they should be able to see community value there, but you can't. So try clicking on strategic area again. There we go, and click on community value. Great. So these are the specific metrics that we're looking at right now. And community relevance is simply saying, do you think that LTD provides an important service in the community? And these are all related. These are all survey results. This is what we're getting our results from right now. Access to frequent transit for minoritized populations. And then our community partner perception of LTD, which is something we have not yet measured. But it's due to be measured next quarter.
Okay, no, thank you for showing me that. I appreciate that. One other question. You may not know the answer to this, but if you do, great. How did LTD come up with the threshold values to determine whether you're in green, whether you're in red, whether you're in yellow?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah. We set benchmark targets based on either our historical performance or benchmarking against other transit agencies or best practice. So benchmarking, and there was some research that went into that.
I was just trying to understand what kind of standard you were using.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Against yourself, that's
yeah, and in some cases we are, in some cases we're not. I mean, on these ones where you have this little shape of the United States, that is showing that we're actually being compared to other transit agencies. Right. And I think if you click on that first one, community relevance, and then if you go to the bottom there, oh yeah, so peer group, it'll show the peer group that we're being on the right, under 2023, the graph at the bottom. And then just click on the gray bar. There, yeah, so it's showing us compared to another transit organization. This is the Rapid and Chariots, and looks like the Rapid doesn't have their score up yet for the last quarter, but Chariots, what did I say, 64%? 84%. So,
and I'm assuming those other agencies or other organizations are similar or same in capacity as what LTD.
They are not all. That's a great clarification. I would have to look at the list. There's a range of sizes.
Okay. I mean,
yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah. It does affect the benchmarking. Although for something like this, does the service provide value to the community? Maybe it doesn't matter what size you are, but maybe it does. Right. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, no, I applaud you for because it's very hard to look at yourself, regardless of who you're comparing yourself with. It's very hard to look at yourself and say, look, I want to become better, or I want to change to optimize what you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Tom, I saw your hand up, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to respond or did. Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other questions or reflections for Amy?
I would just throw out your question about the metrics and where they come from, and where this is the kind of feedback we're looking for as we're going through the refresh. So we'll welcome that input of, have you thought about measuring this as a key performance indicator that gives us more real-time insights? And we're obviously thinking about those things a lot. But I think the intent of this committee is to help us in partnering and thinking about those problems.
Thanks for that, Amy. I think on that note too, thinking about when that opportunity for this space will be for, because I do think that we have a lot of folks that have some good reflections for this conversation. So getting that on the agenda for the agenda maker in this space, which I guess is me talking to Tom and saying, we're going to put that on there. So thank you. And thanks, Amy. Appreciate us tricking you into leaving and then coming right back. So thank you. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? All right. If seeing that there is none and there's nothing online, we will go ahead and adjourn at 7 o'clock. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Appreciate Amy and